Hello, I'm Andy Agathangelo, and I'm very proud to be the founder of campaign organisation Transparency Task Force. We are a UK-based but very international campaign organisation, a social enterprise. We have activity and members in 20 countries around the world, and I'm delighted to let you know that this particular event is a particularly international one. We have people who've booked onto the event from, wait for it, long list of countries, from Argentina,
Wow.
from Botswana, Canada, Costa
Mm.
Rica, France, Germany, Ireland, of course, Kenya with yourself, Maureen, Mexico, Nigeria, South Africa, Spain, the UK, and of course, the United States of America too. So isn't it wonderful, folks, that through the technology of the internet and Zoom, we are able to reach out to a truly, truly international audience? I'm not surprised we have an international audience today, given the theme of the session, financial crime. Of course, financial crime is a truly international activity.
Yeah.
We're here today to listen to Maureen Mutua talk about her book, The Untold Stories of Financial Crime. Later on, I'll be talking about Faces of Financial Crime, which is a document Transparency Task Force produced a few years ago. It is built around the case studies of 22 individuals who unfortunately became victims of financial crime. They were victims of investment scandals or pension frauds, banking misconduct, insolvency that had been weaponized, and all that kind of thing. But what we're going to be hearing about mostly, of course, today is Maureen's book, The Untold Stories of Financial Crime. I'll be passing over to Maureen in just a few moments. And I just want to really acknowledge and celebrate the truly, truly international audience we've got here today. Many of you are brand new to Transparency Task Force. So if you do choose to get involved with the conversation later, when we have the Q&A and discussion, please do take a moment to introduce yourselves if you are brand new to our community. I hope that sets the scene, other than to say the issue of financial crime is very front of mind for us as a campaigning organization. We have many members who have been impacted very badly through having lost their life savings in one kind of financial crime or another. We do have people in our community who are having very dark thoughts about where they are left, having lost all their life savings. And as some of you know, one of our volunteers took his life a few years ago as a consequence of losing his life savings just as he was about to reach retirement. That was Ian Davis, rest in peace. I'll come back to Ian Davis a little bit later on. So this, ladies and gentlemen, is a very important topic. It's a topic that's impacting too many people all around the world. It's a topic that deserves our attention because, of course, the subtext here is what can we do about financial crime? What can we do to help the people who've sadly become victims? And perhaps even more importantly, what can we do to mitigate the risk of there being too many victims in the future? Can we please show our appreciation to Maureen, everyone, in the traditional way? And as we do that, Maureen, I'll pass over to you to introduce yourself, talk about yourself, your background, your book,
Yeah.
and so on.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Maureen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. I am so honored. You don't know how grateful I feel just to meet different people I don't normally interact with. I mean, I'm always looking for new interactions and new ways of spreading the word about financial crime. And one of the ways I thought that I would spread the word is by writing books about it. And here we are. So my name is Maureen Mutua. I was born in Kenya, raised here. I went to University of Bolton in Dubai for my bachelor's and my MBA, same university. Then I worked for Thomson Reuters, I worked for KPMG, and then I moved back to Kenya. Now, when I moved back to Kenya, I couldn't get a job. It's impossible, literally, to get a job in AML for someone of my level in the country. So I decided to become a consultant, and luckily enough, through LinkedIn and through my books, I'm now consulting for governments. I have consulted for Ethiopia, the government of Ethiopia twice. My first job in Ethiopia was for creating a virtual assets framework. Then my second job in Ethiopia was training and creating a framework for the Ethiopian Securities Exchange and writing a curriculum for AML, corporate governance, and risk management. I also worked in the government of Eswatini, providing a framework for virtual assets as well. Then I worked for the East African Community, which is the Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania joint intergovernmental organization, where I wrote policies and procedures for AML. This is my first book. I'm so proud of this book because it took me, I wrote it when I was I had lost hope with everything in life. I had lost my job and I was struggling with everything. And once I wrote the book and marketed it on LinkedIn, I made $30,000 in 2 months. And that's just changed my life completely. So it's good to think out of the box sometimes when things are not working out. Now, the Untold Stories of Financial Crime, why we are here, I couldn't find people to interview for 3 years. I wrote this book over a period of 3 years because people would come in, they're like, oh, I'm not authorized to speak about this by my bank. I don't think I want my name out there. You know, people had so many concerns, you know, because these are employees and you know, they're afraid of the future and what's going to happen if their name is, you know, found somewhere in a book. So I kept going back and forth and I almost gave up, but I was like, you know what, let me just continue and see. I had planned on having at least 50 interviews, but I couldn't find that many people. So I settled on, I think, 2025. And so that's how the book was born. The Untold Stories of Financial Crimes, just like the topic suggests, it's about bankers telling their stories of their experience in the bank when it comes to financial crime. Them explaining this is my role, these are my instructions when this happens, this is what we do in our bank, this is how we do it, and this is my opinion. At the end of the day, I wanted them to give their opinion on the subject. So probably if you haven't read the book, just want to one of my biggest interviews was with Keith Bulfin. I'm not sure you know him, but he's Australian. He worked for the FBI, CIA for 20 years. He was an undercover agent, and his story was huge. You know, he told me how he worked with the government to uncover cartels, to transfer money for cartels as an undercover agent. And it was eye-opening. I mean, I felt like nobody because, you know, I'm behind the laptop, he's on the field, you know, and it was amazing to learn, to see that, you know what, there are people out there actually stopping the crime. And so this book is my best because it was very real. It's not just, you know, writing, but it was very real. These are real experiences that happened. And I don't want to go too deeply into it before we get introduced to everyone. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much indeed, Maureen. That's great. Let me, if I may, ask you a few questions about the book. What in particular was it that motivated you to want to write the untold stories of financial crime? What was the burning passion that you had that made you feel you had to get this book out there?
Yes, that's my why. You know, all my books, the why am I in prevention of money laundering? Why do I do this? And I look at my country, Kenya. I know the ins and outs of the government. I mean, the other day, people had to, members of parliament had to be bribed to pass a money laundering law. You see you know, the irony of that.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
since growing up, you watch the TV, you move to another country and things don't change in your country. And then we have the neighboring countries, the same issues. Then we have South Africa with the Guptas, the same issue. Then living in Dubai, same issues, you know. Like when are we, you know, I mean, I wanted to leave a mark. Like in case I'm not here tomorrow, I want to leave a mark and actually care.
Mm.
You know? because there are people being trafficked right now. You know, there are children being trafficked. There's poaching money. Animals are getting killed. You know, financial crime is really wide. There's corruption happening. There's schools that have not been built because somebody bought a home in Dubai. Somebody bought a home in London. It's very common for Kenyan and the region people to buy houses in London, you know, and all that money, it's our children here in Kenya that suffer because it's money that should have gone to social services, money that should have gone to, you know, prevent something else, you know, build a hospital, build a school, buy kids a book. I mean, education in Kenya is extremely expensive, but where does the money go? You know, so that was my why. I wanted to find a way to make the world listen. Yeah, thank you.
That's very powerful, Maureen. Are you of the view that things are getting better, staying the same, getting worse? What do you think is the general trajectory in terms of how serious things are when it comes to financial crime and anti-money laundering?
I think there's policies in every country, there's procedures in every bank, but things are getting worse because most people in positions of power do not have the political will to implement anything. Most people for example, I'll give you an example. And this is an example of Eswatini, Kenya, South Africa, Uganda, Tanzania. Let's say I'm in the bank, I see a suspicious activity. Someone came, they put 10 million Kenya shillings, and then we flag it to the FIU because banks don't investigate. The FIU is the intelligence center. They just go and get a bribe from that guy and he walks away. So it's getting worse because people believe that they are poor. You know, there's this belief that I have to make it in life. You know, so many people are desperate, I would say, for money. You know, and I'm speaking about the region because I have experience in the region. I'm also speaking about Dubai because I have experience in the Middle East. Those countries just want money, period. I mean, the UAE was gray listed. And having lived there, I could see the opulence and the wealth, and it doesn't make sense. You know, there are so many
Yeah.
issues with the UK as well. I mean, I'm always keeping myself to date, keeping myself up to date, reading news, reading the Panama Papers and all those exposés. And Bitcoin has made it worse, cryptocurrency, you know, because by the time they trace you and by the time they trace the money, yes, it's traceable, but it takes time. That has made it worse. So I would say things have become worse.
Are you of the view, Maureen, that it will eventually get sorted, or are you looking into the future and saying to yourself, you know what? The forces that are making this bad and the forces that are making this get worse are unstoppable. This is going to all end in some great, big, almighty, horrific calamity for society worldwide.
Well,
are you hopeful in the long run, or what?
the world is heading towards fascism and totalitarianism. And once there's no democracy where you can't question authority, that's it. I can't question, where is this money from? Where did you get? That's it. So we need to be able to see the world is heading towards fascism. And the other problem is that different regions, I would say the EU is doing very well. It's, as a bloc, they're doing very well. They have one case here, like Estonia had that case with the CEO and the bank. But the EU itself, excluding Russia and Ukraine, they're doing very well in preventing of money laundering. They have so many laws and they actually put them into practice. But the rest of the world, I don't know so much about Brazil and what's happening there. It's quite far, and I don't have any interactions with that South America. But because of the cartels and the Mexico and the drug trade and the proximity to America, and proximity to the islands. By islands, I mean Guernsey, Jersey, Cayman, St.
Yeah.
Helens, St. Vincent. All those islands have a zero policy on transparency. You can keep your money there as long as you wish, you know? So it's not something will change, but it will take the older generation, because I feel like they don't want to pass on power to the younger people. Their way of thinking, and I mean people in power, I don't mean everyone, their way of thinking, when you're 80, 75, your way of thinking and the way you see life. For example, if someone wants to buy a home who's 25, their way of thinking is very different. Their opportunities are limited. We have AI, you know, we have all this lack of jobs that is going to be global. It's already happening everywhere. People are losing jobs en masse, you know. So their way of thinking is to hold on to power. Let's go back to how we used to do things. Let's go back, thinking that things will change, but things will not change because that we're living in a different world. We didn't have
You're making
AI. Immigration was not as big. Everyone is living everywhere nowadays. You can buy a $1 home in Italy and move there, renovate it. Immigration has changed the game, you know? And now Africa wants to merge with China. So the world has changed. So we can't go back, you know?
you're making some very, very interesting connections. Maureen, frankly, you're making some connections in these issues that I wasn't expecting us to go to. You're talking about the political landscape, the risk of the journey towards fascism
Mhm.
and autocracies, and you seem to be seeing a connection between the terrible state of financial crime and the risk of fascism. Am I right in thinking the the essence of that connection
Mhm.
is that if we allow the financial system to be so unaccountable
Mhm.
that we allow poorly enforced regulations that are enabling and allowing financial crime, that is exactly the kind of environment or ecosystem that would enable oligarchs and super powerful people to thrive and survive. Is that the point you're making?
That's what I'm saying. I mean, the world is America. As much as I hate to admit it, the world is run by America. Why? Because of the dollar. The IMF was in Kenya. They had a team last week just in Kenya arguing about our currency. They don't want to devalue it because that devalues the dollar. So the America controls a lot of the world. Africa specifically, I don't know about the EU. The EU is very independent, but the other sections where money laundering is very high is controlled by the dollar. And who controls America right now? Is Trump.
I
And is
understand.
Trump listening? Is Trump going against regulation? Yes, Trump is going against, he's removing many regulations, Dodd-Frank and all those others, you know? And in the next 4 years or 3 years, let's say he never comes back, but the damage will be too much to the rest of the world because he's telling people, I'm president. He's empowering other people to do exactly like he's doing. Like if America can do it, we can do it too.
In a little while, I'll show the audience a database we are aware of, which talks about the deregulation happening in the US under the current administration. And by the way, I should mention, my organization, Transparency Task Force, is apolitical. We don't have an interest in people's politics per se. But of course, it is interesting to see how different types of leadership and different types of politics bring about different outcomes for societies. This is fascinating. Going back to the central theme here of anti-money laundering and chasing down financial crime on all those interviews that you conducted, did you encounter any people who were working for banks, Maureen, who felt dissatisfied with the authenticity of the way in which the banks try to deal with this problem? In other words, were they perhaps suspicious that the banks were happy to sometimes turn a blind eye to what they thought might be going on because it suited them commercially to do so?
Actually, no. Banks are in compliance
Mhm.
because most of them have, or the ones I interviewed, all of them had big compliance departments. And nowadays, compliance managers do not want to be found as I'm the one who said, I'm the one who approved this, because they know in the future, if your name is mentioned, you could be disbarred, you don't get a job any longer. So no, all banks were in compliance. The only dissatisfaction was after the bank flags something, there was no action. There was
And
no action from the FIU, from the investigating body, from the police. That's where it ends.
and what are your suspicions as to why there wasn't adequate action after the suspicions had been flagged? Why?
It's very difficult to investigate money laundering. You need resources. You have to have the best technology, especially now with the blockchain for cryptocurrency. You need people who understand blockchain analytics, people who know how to use the blockchain so that once they're tracing the money, you need forensics, first of all. So if someone tells you, this is my contract, I made 10 million, how do you disapprove that? That's the dilemma with money laundering, that it's very hard to prove innocence or guilt, you know.
I
So
understand.
that is the problem, because I always put myself in these situations. Let's say someone reports a big transaction, doesn't make sense. This person doesn't have a big business. It's not adding up. The source of funds is questionable. The country, or either where the money is coming from is questionable. So what do you do next? So in Kenya, there was a certain Russian who transferred 120 million, which is a lot of money, to his girlfriend, and
Mhm.
that he was crazy. He didn't know what he was doing. So that was immediately taken away. But now that is too big. I'm talking about the smart ones, the ones who know to beat the system and what to do, and the ones who have lawyers who can help them navigate the financial game and all that. So it's very difficult to investigate money laundering and reach the end of the investigation.
In a little while, Maureen, I'll open up for contributions from our guests, our audience. Some may have comments, some may have questions, some may have comments and questions.
Yeah.
Maureen, how easy is it for those that are happy to act in bad faith to carry out money laundering, to carry out financial crime? How easy is it?
It depends on which country, which jurisdiction you're doing it from.
So, which countries is it? I'm not looking to do it, by the way. This is
Yeah,
not
yeah,
my
I
motivation
know.
for the question. But which countries is it easy to do it in? Which country is it relatively difficult to do it in?
I would say it's easy in the Middle East, in Qatar, in Dubai, in Kenya. It's easy, but you need to know people. But it's doable. It can be done. And Bahrain, it's easy, and South Africa is hard. I've been to South Africa. I've seen their policies and how they do things. They're very strict, you know, and they have many questions and processes and all these things. So it's hard
Hmm.
to do it in South Africa. And the ease of it is if you decide to use cash, you come with a private plane, land it in Nairobi. You can buy an apartment with cash in Nairobi. You can buy an apartment with cash anywhere in Kenya, and there will be no questions asked. Okay, so it depends on the cash, the easiness of having lots of cash. We
Yeah.
have the Somalis coming into Kenya because Somalia and Sudan is very unstable. They bring a lot of cash into Kenya. There's so many investments that they own in Kenya because they bring in, the pirates. There've been several cases where the pirates kidnapped ships. All that money comes into Kenya. And it's easy because they use cash.
So they steal the ship, they raid the ship, they convert. what the ill-gotten gains into cash, and they do what they pretty much like
Actually,
with
they're
it.
always paid in cash.
Yeah,
When,
yeah.
let's say they got someone from the US or Maersk or one of these big companies, they ask for cash. It's never in a transaction because if it goes to a bank, the bank will obviously not give them the money.
Have you personally, or have you met people that you now know who have felt awkward or vulnerable, scared or frightened to be asking questions around things like financial crime and anti-money laundering? Have you ever felt you were putting yourself in jeopardy? Do you know others who may have felt that way themselves?
No, I've never felt that way. Most people are ignorant. They don't actually know what I do, you know. They just, oh yeah, AML compliance. They don't really, you know, they just think, wow, it's a thing in finance, you know. So I don't meet normally people who understand the ins and outs of it. And if they do, they're just innocent people going about their lives.
And what about whistleblowers? What role do whistleblowers have in this space? Have you met whistleblowers who've helped to bring the truth to the surface? And have whistleblowers ever been uncomfortable in taking on the risk of telling the truth to the powers that be?
Wow, yeah, wow. I met one whistleblower reached out to me actually. It's good that you brought this up. Oh God. So in Kenya, there's a town called Malindi, and it's mostly inhabited by Italians. So there's an airport straight from Italy. They land there, and I don't know if you know it, but it's well known. The F1 Formula One boss has a hotel there. Many people, celebrities go there,
Right.
and there's a lot of drug dealing there. So this whistleblower came to me telling me, Maureen, I know the people dealing with this, and I know they deal with that, and I want you to help me to expose them. I have the evidence, I have a USB, I have photos, and we can actually, I mean, go with you and incognito, you can see it happening. And it was too big. It was too big. And I told him, even if I know, we still have to go to the authorities. At the end of the day, I cannot fully investigate. I don't have the resources or the, you know, and he was like insisting, no, me and you, we can. I'm like, no, it doesn't work like when you blow a whistle, you blow it to someone so that someone can take action. And yeah, so that was it. But there are so many people who know things, but they can't say anything because they know what's going to happen to them. It's not safe. It's not worth it because one person will whistleblow something and they'll disappear. We'll never see them again. We have one Kenyan who sought asylum, I think is in Europe or somewhere, just for one big contract, government contract. And they were
Mm,
looking for him, they were trailing him, and he was quickly given asylum. I think it's in the US or EU. I'm not sure which country.
mm.
So it's very risky to be a whistleblower.
This is serious stuff. Maureen, you talked to us about some countries where it was relatively easy, especially if cash is involved, for anti-money laundering and financial crime to take place. You indicated earlier that the countries where it's easy because there's lack of political will to deal with it. And you touched on the idea that perhaps in Europe, we are relatively good in Europe. I say we, including the UK, but of course, the UK is perhaps different to the rest of Europe. Um, is this because the political will is here in Europe? Are Europeans better at stamping out financial crime because the democracies demand it? And if so, is the real question where financial crime is truly rampant, where anti-money laundering is truly rampant? Is it because in some way the democracy itself has been contaminated by the consequences of crime and corruption?
Well, you're right. The UK is very different from the EU. And you're right, where democracies are very strong, where uh, governments are very strong. For example, the EU, most countries in the EU are not capitalistic. You won't find billionaires living, like there are 10 billionaires in Europe. I mean, it's not easy, but you'll find 100 billionaires in Australia, Russia, America, China, Africa. But the EU, you won't find many people with lots and lots of wealth,
That's interesting.
flashy homes and all this. So that control, because I feel Europe tries to make everyone equal in terms of I earn this much, I pay this much taxes, we all pay the same. So there's no gap in wealth. If it's there, it's not too big. But the UK, on the other hand, is very global. I mean, the financial center in London, very global, dealing with all this. In the EU, there's no such financial center that deals with everyone. But the financial center in London makes it a risky place because anyone, I mean, when the Ukraine war started, there were many oligarchs with money in London and it had to be taken away. So the UK is also high risk because of that. The financial center allows so many different kinds of things to happen there.
That's really interesting. That's a thing we come back to time and time again more in our meetings about the way that UK's past, the offshore jurisdictions have almost enabled the City of London to become a major player in the illicit money flows around the world. Maureen, this has already been very interesting. And what's interesting about yourself in particular is the pretty kind of hands-on experience you've had and dealing with people who've been um, acting badly. I'm going to invite some of our guests today to introduce themselves and share their thoughts. I'm going to go to Paul Birch first of all to tell everyone a little bit about Paul's own personal situation, which has been impacted by some of the issues we're talking about today. And then I'll go to various other folks who perhaps are here for the first time. If you're new to Transparency Task Force and you'd like the chance to chip into the conversation, please do raise your hand or put a note in the chat, and I'll do my best to bring you into the conversation as well. So, particularly if you're new to Transparency Task Force, but even if you're not, of course, you're very welcome to join the conversation. Mr. Paul Birch, tell us all a bit about yourself and your experience on what the consequences can be for crooks getting hold of people's money. Thank you, Paul.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Maureen, for a fascinating insight to the part that you've played so far in trying to expose financial crime. My personal situation is that my family and I, we emigrated to the USA and took out a Cure Ops pension scheme, which is only available to UK citizens or overseas citizens who have accrued pension facilities, pension rights. And basically, I am a victim along with tens of thousands of others at the hands of scammers who have chosen to base themselves in jurisdictions such as Malta, Gibraltar, long list of them, where, as you say, the regulatory and law enforcement agencies have no political will whatsoever to enforce the rule of law. And unfortunately, and Andy has touched upon it, the UK is a central part in the money laundering activities because there is likewise very little, or there is virtually none political will to actually uphold the rule of law. So, I worked very hard for a number of years, built up a business, we sold it out, and I thought that my retirement was going to be sound and secure. And I have basically down to my last few dregs of money because it has just been stolen from me by organized crime. And it's been reported, as you say, to the financial investigation units in the UK, Malta, the Isle of Man, and they just ignore it. It's heartbreaking, not just for me and my family, but for the tens of thousands of others who are caught up in the same situation.
That's very sad. I'm really sorry to hear that. I'm really sorry. So my question, sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
Which year did this happen?
Well, I retired in 2011, and since 2018, I have had an ongoing litigation case in Malta, which is still in the preliminary hearing stages. So there is just no political will in any of the major money laundering jurisdictions to address the problems that they know exist. There is evidence to show that money has been laundered through FCA regulated banks and so on. You've got FCA regulated auditors because four of the big five auditing companies are headquartered in London. So I think they too fall under the FCA regulatory umbrella. And it doesn't matter what evidence you provide, it just gets
Oh,
swept under the carpet.
wow.
Well, and this is so disturbing to hear it, and of course there are literally, of course, tens of thousands of people like Paul who've become a victim of financial crime in this way. Paul, thank you very much indeed for sharing your
You're
testimony.
welcome.
I noticed that Amy Gill has put a note in the chat. Amy, why don't you take your microphone off mute and introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your situation, Amy? Please do.
Hi, Andy. Hello again. I
Hi.
haven't spoken to you for a couple of years.
Hmm.
Yeah, so I'm my husband tragically died in front of me and the children, which was horrific. And he had £500,000 worth of life insurance, which was with Aviva. And Aviva then took instruction from a financial advisor who had sold the policies. It was unauthorized, unlawful instruction. She then locked the money into a trust bank account, which she actually breached the life insurance contracts, which specifically in clauses said the money mustn't be held in trust.
Oh.
But she put it into trust. I then went up against the firm that she was working for, and I got threats to be harmed. I had the police sent to my home at 9 o'clock at night from instruction from this firm telling me I must not proceed to the to the regulator. I was announced in the annual review as last year with the Financial Conduct Authority as the widow who's been denied her husband's life insurance and put the consumer duty under question. And I've just had a battle with them, but I've just become, it's crazy because I didn't really know much about financial services, but I've had to upskill. And I've taken on the Financial Conduct Authority and I've just registered the matter with the High Court of Justice. So I'm going as a litigant in person and I'm exposing, I've uncovered that they've done forgery. I've got evidence of this. So I've got evidence of forgery, probate fraud, theft, and tax evasion of £500,000. So I've exposed them all in this great big I suppose it's a bit of a scandal, really. So I shall be proceeding to the High Court over when they instruct me to go. But it's all registered, and I had my seal of approval as well. But yeah, they stole it off me, my disabled son, and my two little boys, and yeah, they just took the money off us. So at the point of payout, and Aviva assisted them to do it, and everybody's just covered it up. It's shocking. So,
Wow.
and the thing is, these companies are very powerful, but I've had to put a report together myself and I've had to show it and lay it out so that the court can see the actual what they've basically what's been said, and then the fact of the matter, then the evidence, then the breach of, And there's multiple breaches, and there's a lot of people who really should be going to jail for this matter. And these are insurance companies that we all know, and you know they're sort of they're recognised firms, and they have been highly aggressive towards me and my children. In support of this financial advisor who ended up getting £18,000 in bribery. She did all this for £18,000 and then £2,000 a year, locked the money away so that I can't touch it or neither of the children can. But the Ombudsman, what they did is they hid, they covered up on call recordings, but I got quite suspicious a while back, so I started recording the calls as well. So they've then hidden all the information and said that the recordings don't exist anymore. But then I've submitted that to the court to show that conversations were taking place about this fraud. So what the Ombudsman did, I made one complaint and then they registered 4 case reviews, and then they funneled all the data into 3 case reviews that they didn't want to look at. And then they isolated the data that they said they were prepared to look at into 1 case review. So I've shown how they've manipulated data protection to basically hide and protect all of the people involved as well. And then obviously, and then delete calls and then confirm that they hadn't recorded these calls. But these are named individuals that I've submitted to the High Court as well to throw them all under the bus. So, yeah.
Amy, your case is phenomenal. Please do keep us up to date with it. Please do keep us up to date. Maureen, what Amy's talking about there is the
insurance fraud.
She's alleging this, if you like, the systemic failure of the institutions to act and oversee and govern and create accountability. Is that a pattern that you've seen elsewhere, where the regulators, the authorities, the ombudsman, etc., may not be up to scratch or may have some issues that seem to be preventing them from working effectively?
I think in Amy's case is very different, specific. The insurance company failed to pay the money. Why? Did they give you any reason? Because
they did pay the money. They took explicit consent from me to pay the money into Barclays, and then the financial advisor, she conducted and did probate. And at the time, I was traumatized. I just watched my husband die. So I didn't really know that she couldn't do probate. So then she filled all the forms in, did probate. She held all the documents. She then pretended to the Coventry Building Society that she was doing probate and falsified some documents to do that. She unlinked my mortgage so my mortgage wouldn't get paid off. She then took over my husband's bank account so that she became the personal representative of his bank account. She then used that to set up another bank account and then she intercepted with Aviva, phoned them up, because Aviva confirmed this by letter, phoned them up, told them not to pay the money into Barclays, as I had agreed through explicit consent in a death settlement claim, and pay it into a different bank account, and then basically took the money and decided, she even admitted in internal data that she decided she didn't want me to receive the money anymore.
Wow.
Okay, so where is she now? I'm
she's trading in the UK, and she's a chartered financial advisor, and she's got a lovely glowing web page that she's the most amazing person.
She's not been arrested. You've not sent her any.
No, they're all protecting her. So
rather than
the company she works for.
Sorry, ladies, rather than get into too much detail on this particular case, especially because of some of the legal dimensions to it, it's probably wise if we leave it there. That clearly, Amy, your situation is truly remarkable. It's sorry to hear it, and good luck in the High Court. Allow me to invite anybody else to come in here. Mr. John Hunter, please tell us about your own organisation in a moment and the reasons why you feel interested in this topic. John, why don't you take yourself off mute and tell us all a bit about yourself and AXA and why this topic's of interest to you. Then we'll go to others in the room. I can see we've got Mr. Paul Bates, Paul Bates Barristers with us, Anthony Stansfeld and various others. Thank you, John. Your perspectives on this topic so far, John?
Yeah, Andy, Well, it's been an extremely shocking listen, hasn't it? The UK Shareholders Association is primarily a group that promotes the rights and the interests of private shareholders and their ability to take the companies which they have investments into account. And that tends to, we therefore tend to recruit people who have a sort of moral compass, and therefore while we have no direct activity in this area, we have a number of people who are extremely interested in it, and you know most of them, Andy. One of them's a close member of your organisation. So we're not doing anything directly in this area, except to some extent it's modified our view of the city and the function that the city takes in the business of money. And that concern stretches into all sorts of areas, particularly the areas of what I call financial learning, but the usual word is financial education. I prefer the word financial learning because it puts the emphasis on the individual, which is where it should be. And there's an enormous amount of interest and pressure now for financial education, financial learning, and an enormous amount of it is financed by the city, which is of some concern to us. So that's where the shareholders group is, and we'll continue to work in those directions. But I say again that what I've heard this afternoon has been quite shocking.
Indeed, thank you. Thank you, John. We'll go to Anthony Stansfield in a moment. Anthony's very active within the Transparency Task Force community, and there's a few, well, certainly a couple of very, very, very high-profile cases that Anthony's been close to. Anthony, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about your background in relation to the Police Crime Commission and some of the cases that you have a real interest in where there's suspicions of serious anti-money laundering and financial crime. Thank you, Anthony.
Well, I was the Police and Crime Commissioner of Thames Valley when we took on the very large Lloyd's HBOS frauds out of Reading, which probably amounted between 800 million and 1 billion. We successfully prosecuted it at considerable expense. It cost about £7 or £8 million to bring the case. Lloyd's were eventually fined, I can't remember what the exact figure was, 50 or 60 million, but reduced quite heavily by the Financial Conduct Authority. The entire money from that case went straight to the Treasury, and Thames Valley wasn't paid back. So we were out of pocket to the tune of several million, which we could barely afford. And the one lesson it went out that it simply was not worth police forces taking on fraud. And most of them are far too small to take on fraud, and they haven't got the expertise. We had to call in about 40, 50 outside accountants to go through all the figures, while Lloyds Bank did their absolute very best to prevent the prosecution, denied a fraud had taken place until the jury returned its verdict. But what was quite clear was the banks, notably Lloyds and RBS, were taking companies, small and medium-sized companies, to bits, farmers to pieces, on basically false documentation very often. And it was a very easy way for the banks to make money. And if people protested about it and tried to fight it, it would end up in a civil court. There was a coterie of judges who always seemed to take on these cases, a number of them seemed to also work for the banks. The whole thing absolutely stank then, and it stinks to this day as nothing has been done about it. And there has been a corruption that runs through the system the whole way. And what is extraordinary is those regulatory authorities that should do something about it, notably the SFO, Serious Fraud Office, the Financial Conduct Authority, and the National Crime Agency, all slope shoulders. And they end up saying, pass it to Action Fraud, which is a call centre in Glasgow, who send it down to a police force, who put it on the all too difficult pile, and nothing gets done about it. So these major frauds against a huge number of companies and things, and the sums run into many billion, are totally ignored by the system, and they carry on, and they're doing the country a great deal of damage. And I've done my absolute best to bring them to attention. And however good the evidence is, it'll always end up in a civil court, where even if you, in the unlikely event of you winning it with a totally prejudiced judge on behalf of the banks, they will immediately appeal it, and people can't afford to take these cases through, especially when the bank has absolutely taken everything away from them. So the system is basically corrupt, and nothing is being done about it. Andy, I've probably said enough.
Anthony, thank you very much. It just goes to show the seriousness of it all. Maureen spoke earlier about there being a lack of political will. It occurs to me that all the time police forces are starved of the resources that they need to properly hunt down fraudsters and properly investigate them, properly prosecute them, get them locked up if that's what justice demands. All the time there's a lack of resource. It can't possibly happen. Maureen, you've heard quite a bit of. You've heard quite. Thank you, Anthony. Go for it. Thank you.
I was going to say one thing. Could I just quickly add to that? After the Thames Valley case, an inquiry was set up called the Dobbs Review. It was meant to
Yes.
report within a very few months, and a High Court judge was put in charge of it. Some extreme, extraordinary reason, Lloyd's stepped in and said, we'll pay for it. 8 years later, that report into what went on within Lloyd's and HBOS and everything still has not reported after 8 years. It's absolutely unbelievable. And the Sally Masterton case, this was the banker working in Scotland out of Edinburgh, who was asked to investigate by Lloyd's themselves what had gone on. When she actually investigated it and put forward a report called the Turnbull Report, she was sacked for writing it without compensation. And it took me and Lord Hollick about 3 years, and we practically had the chairman of Lloyd's by the collar. I mean, very nearly literally in a three-way meeting we had in London before Lloyd's would compensate her about 2 or 3 million. But they ruined her life for a considerable amount of time. The sheer dishonesty by Lloyd's Bank has been quite extraordinary. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. More, anything you'd like to say in reflection to what's been discussed so in the last sort of 10, 15 minutes or so? Then once you've spoken to that, I'll talk to people about Violation Tracker. Thank you, Maureen.
I think, oh God, this is so painful even for me to hear. Where are the young people? I don't understand why no one is fighting this. That's my big question. In Kenya, we have the Gen Z protest that really, really has changed everything for us. Politicians used to go on social media. They used to take all these big trips and account it, and now that has changed. Something must be done. Other than high court and courts and all these things, there has to be a fight. There has to be a war. These people don't care. That's just the only way. You know, if people don't, they're not listening. They're not listening. In Kenya, we have that, but now it's going down because now we showed them, you know what, we can take over this country. There has to be, something has to be done. Otherwise, it will not stop. I promise you. Because they feel emboldened to continue doing it. You know?
I understand.
Yeah.
Maureen, thank you. Thank you. I'm going to share my screen to introduce some of you who are new to our community to a database you may not yet be familiar with. I hope you like it when I show it to you. This is Violation Tracker UK. I will be putting a link to this in the chat shortly, but I will also include links to the American version and the international version. It is a database, as the name suggests, of violations. So it's a tool for researching corporate regulatory infringements in the UK. And you can search it in many different ways. I'm going to show you two specific advanced searches. So I'm clicking on where it says advanced search in the bottom right-hand corner. And as you can see, you can search the database in many, many different ways. I'm going to go to the section called offence type. And you see you have a drop-down list with many things in it. I'm going to first of all show you economic sanction violations. Of course, there's a correlation between economic sanction violations and the kind of things we're talking about this afternoon. So you put in the search term, as I've just done, You then click on search, and what it shows you first of all are the organizations involved.
Yeah.
So you can see here we've got Standard Chartered, Vanquis Banking Group, Wise PLC, Johnson Matthey, and we've then got the individual cases ranked by how big they are. And if you click on one, for example, I'm going to click on the first one for Standard Chartered Bank, a penalty amount of £20 million. We click on the amount and it gives us the written narrative about what happened. So here, the violation description is that breaches of Article 5.3 of the EU Council Regulation 833/2014 and Regulation 3B of the Ukraine European Union Financial Sanctions number 3, Regulations 2014, the first penalty amount of 7.6 and a bit million pounds, the second penalty amount is 12 and a bit, and so on and so forth. And very, very importantly, at the very bottom, it shows you the source of data. If you click here, it goes to the official record that the data in the database has been based on, which is very, very powerful. So that's one of many searches you can do. I'm going to show you another one now because of the theme of anti-money laundering. So we go to anti-money laundering. Can you see I just chose it from the drop-down list?
Yeah.
And look what happens when we click on this. We click on search, and we get exactly we get the top 10 worst offending banks. Well, organizations, I should say. They're not necessarily banks. NatWest, Deutsche, Barclays, etc., etc. We then have the individual anti-money laundering offences.
Okay.
So NatWest has been fined in 2021 by the FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority. The fine was 264 and a bit million pounds. If I click on the amount, again, it will take us to the narrative. NatWest pleaded guilty to 3 offences of failing to comply with money laundering regulations by accepting 365 million pounds in checks and cash from a commercial customer with suspicious behaviour that was not acted upon and was not spotted by an incorrect automated transaction monitoring system. Again, if we click on the source of data, it takes us to the official record. As you can see here, the official statement by the Financial Conduct Authority. Now, what's really interesting is if you scroll down this list, you will see the same organizations being caught committing the same anti-money laundering offences time after time after time, which makes us wonder if these organizations see being fined as a cost of doing business.
Yes, you're right. Because nowadays, all banks have a budget for fines. Can you believe that? They have a budget. Like, this is our yearly budget for, we know we are being fined, where we might be fined because of something we miss or something we do. So if we do get fined, they have a budget for it.
Wow.
Yeah.
And if they're anticipating being fined, it's almost as if they've got malpractice baked into the business plan, isn't it? That's the problem. We call this recidivism, where organizations carry on doing the wrong thing time after time after time. Fascinating stuff. Would anybody else like to chip into the conversation who's not yet had a chance to do so? Please do raise your hand if you'd like to come in. Why don't I go to Paul Bates? I think you just
I
put your
wanted
hand
to
up.
ask you, I wanted to ask you about the database.
Yes, yes.
Is it owned by Transparency Task Group, or is
No,
it?
no, it's not owned by us. I am very proud to chair the UK advisory board of it. I was involved in helping to create the momentum that led to the creation of the UK database. But it is organized by an organization called Good Jobs First, who are based in Washington, D.C., who we know very, very well. I will put a link to the UK version, the international version, and the US version in the chat.
Is it for subscription or is it free?
No, it is free. You can have become like a super user and pay to download all the data, etc. But broadly speaking, it is completely free. Makes it a wonderful utility for investigators, for journalists, for authors, for people like you, Maureen, who want to sort of have a good look at what's going on. I'll put a link to it in the chat, and I hope you find it very useful, Maureen.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll try to use it. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Paul Bates. Paul, your reflections on the conversation so far, anything you want to add?
Thank you very much, Maureen, for an informative presentation. I wondered a couple of things from your perspective. One is whether AI offers any promise of more effective AML enforcement and regulation monitoring. What are your thoughts?
I mean, we are training AI for the wrong things, if you ask me. There are so many things it can solve, you know, like money laundering. You know, we just need to, you know, machine learning. I mean, I wrote a book about artificial intelligence and money laundering, and it's very easy to tell a system, go through our system and track ABCD. We just need to give it triggers, or what the bank calls, what do they call them? You know, checks, like a checklist. If someone is from this country, trigger it. If this amount is deposited, trigger it. If this happens, we can use it for that. But it's not happening. I mean, in Kenya, they are using it to track taxpayers instead of tracking people who are corrupt and who are stealing money from us. But they're using it to make sure you pay your taxes. You know, so if we use it for the right things, AI will change our lives forever. But when you don't have the power, and you don't have, you know, power is everything. You can have the money, but if you don't have the power to have a good, even if you have a good AI system, and the system, the people in power reject it, there's nothing you can do about it.
I also wondered whether you felt that if banks, countries rather, sponsored cryptocurrency, they would have greater motivations to regulate and prevent fraud involving cryptocurrencies. There's talks of the US government sponsoring a cryptocurrency. I don't think Canada would until the US did. I don't know what the situation in the UK.
Yeah. So governments, they don't do crypto. It's called a stable coin. And it's more for control. It's not even for anything else, because once you use it, they can track everything you're using it for. So it does not help. Stable coins do not help anyone with anything. It's more controlled by the governments. What I know is that governments don't care. I've worked with so many governments to fully, confidently tell you, governments don't care unless there's a consequence. You show them this is a serious consequence if you don't effect this, if you don't do this. They don't care. And they're just very bureaucratic, hiding behind their offices, you know, pretending that we have policies, but it boils down to, you know what, let it be.
Wow. Powerful stuff, Maureen. Thank you very much for your input, Paul. Would anybody else like to chip into the conversation before we start bringing it to a close? Or just have a quick look, make sure I'm not missing anybody's hand. In which case, we're going to go to Maureen for her final comments, and then we'll wrap up today's conversation. Maureen, it's been great to listen to you. You have brought a unique perspective to the issues we've been discussing today. It's been a real pleasure listening to you, and I love the way that you get your message across in such a human way. It's wonderful to hear it in such an honest and forthright way. Maureen, what would your closing comments be for today's conversation? Thank you.
These are dangerous times. We have become a fraudulent world. That's what we've become. I wish I can be optimistic. I wish I can say we are not. But from my experience, and everything I say is from experience, not from what and from what I read, from what people are telling me face to face. We have become very fraudulent. We will do anything for money. You know, I have a cousin who went to Dubai. He got a job, and that job was in a Chinese center, in a full building with 12 stories, scamming people. 12 stories full of Chinese people, full of people from different countries, and the UAE is doing nothing about it.
Are you talking like I think there's a phrase for it, like industrial scamming, almost like a scam factory?
Like it's a business. To scam people is a big, big business.
Wow.
You know, someone just a 12-story building full of the Chinese. He went there. He told me he was recording it secretly. All these people are making calls. They find you on Facebook, they find you on LinkedIn, they find you on Instagram, your children. It's a big business. So everything I say is from what I know. So we are living in very dangerous times, very fraudulent times. Keep a low profile. Even if you have money in the bank, don't trust the bank with your money. Keep a low profile. That is my advice. Keep a low profile of everything financial that you do.
Maureen, you've driven home some points very powerfully today. Let's show our appreciation to Maureen Moutoir for sharing her experience and telling us about her book and giving us such a fresh and compelling insight into your world, Maureen. Thank you very much. I'd love to have you back again, Maureen, at some stage.
Thank you.
We'll talk further.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for being with us today, especially as it was such a super international meeting. Maureen, it's been great to hear from you. Good day, everybody. Thank you very much indeed. Good day. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.